Hey, everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with somebody new to a lot of you, and I'm very excited to talk to her. Emily, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm doing very good. It's peak summer in Scotland, so it's about 10 degrees right now. But yeah, all excited.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. You have a project, but I'm also just really interested to learn how you came to do comics and what you like about them, and also why comics. There's a lot of different things people can do. But to kick it right off, this is you have a project in Kickstarter, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's actually two books. Is that right?
Yeah, so they're two books. They're sort of the opposite of each other, but they exist within the same universe. So there's Is Told by Rats, which is following the Rat Pack, and they're a group of rats that get up to a life of crime. They make the worst decisions every time. And then you've got the opposite of that, which is Be More Gus. And that's sort of peaceful and tranquil stories where Gus, who's a very cute chihuahua, finds the small pleasures in everyday life.
Beautiful. And you sell these as a pack, so you get kind of both sides of the story in one. And there's just a few days to go. By the time you're listening to this interview, you probably got about a week, so maybe a little bit more. So you need to get out there and back it. But it's on Kickstarter. And how is the Kickstarter experience? How are you enjoying that?
It's actually been great. And I mean, no matter how much you believe in your own work, Kickstarter is scary if you've not done it before. When you put everything up, you have that moment of, what if this runs for 30 days and it makes £5, $5?
Yeah.
And so far it's been so good. We've met our first goal, and I have lots of different stretch goals for if we get further that everyone benefits from. But everyone's just been really supportive and really nice. It's a nice community that's already on there.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. Comics can be rougher at times for people coming in. There's a lot of controversy and churn going on right now in comics. Obviously, one more question about your book, and then so you have these two. What ages? Is this something you can give kids a little bit older? Where would you place this? Do you think?
So It's Told by Rats has a rough age guidance of 16 plus. I mean, the violence that's in there is cartoon violence. It's rats. It's rats with guns, with knives. There's some blood, um, alluding to sexual activity. There's nothing graphic, but maybe just take it with a pinch of salt. And Be More Gus is for anyone and everyone.
Beautiful. Kind of like manga sensibilities a little bit in terms of where that would sit.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right. So, kind of getting into, I was going to ask you how you got into comics, but for those of you who don't know, there is a connection to you that probably helped a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, growing up, my dad is Mark Miller, so he is a comic book creator and writer, and it's just a world that I've always been around and somewhat in.
Yeah. And were you very close to Mark's work when he was? Because I mean, over the last 20 years, or maybe a little bit more than that, I mean, he's really broken and obviously made a huge impact. And I have two daughters, and they're also kind of figuring out what they want to do. I have one that definitely wants to follow my footsteps, one that wants to be as far away from that as possible. How did that, seeing that world, is that just always something that you liked, or how'd you think about it?
I always really enjoyed it, and I had elements that I loved. I've always loved drawing. I've always loved storytelling, painting, and my mum and dad are both really good at art. That's something that we always did at home in our spare time. Like even now, if friends are meeting my family, they'll be like, "Oh, so what do you draw in your spare time?" As if that's just what everyone does. So I always liked that side of it. And my dad started off wanting to be a comic book artist, so he was always kind of putting that information into my brain, and I would learn it all. So there was kind of the projects he was working on, and then we did a little bit of kind of reading classic comics. We had some Fantastic Four, some Spider-Man, and then throughout my teens, I probably drifted a little from it because you're trying to figure out your own thing, what you're doing. And I've always loved painting. I spend half my year painting and I spend the other half illustrating, but it all sort of exists in the one ecosystem. And then more recently, I just kind of realised I'm naturally falling into it. If you've grown up in an environment where someone has that skill set, their social circles based around it, it's your talk over the dinner table every night, you're naturally going to know quite a lot about it already and be drawn to it.
No, I mean, it makes complete sense. And I think I love it. So you had comics and you went that drifting. A lot of people are doing that now. We're entering this new generation, and Mark had said something similar. I know, so I'm not copying him, but that more and more of these creators coming into it are coming from a very different space. They're coming from visual art or manga or places, not the traditional comic book world. In the 90s, people were coming into this going, man, I've always loved the X-Men. I want to do the X-Men. And now we have people coming in saying, I like One Piece. I want to go into One Piece, or I like, painting. It sounds like you're in a very similar part of that journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's also a slight narcissism to Gen Z of, oh, I love that thing, but I can entirely create my own worlds. I won't necessarily latch on to something that already exists. So yeah, for me, it was definitely I love the path and the universe element of all of it, but I felt like, oh, I can do my own version of that where everything intertwines and comes together.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I love the way you said that, because so in fact, if I could play it back, it's we had generations that were really excited to work on things that already existed, and that was kind of their pinnacle. Their dream was to work on Spider-Man. They want to work on Spider-Man. But then now what you're describing, and I see a lot of it, it makes a lot of sense. So we have, young adults, people coming in, new creators who almost very little interest in putting their hands on Spider-Man. Instead, it is, I want my own thing. I want to be able to make my own legend, not just work on somebody else's. Is that's what you're describing?
Yeah, part of that, and I think even the flexibility of, if you're a creator now, or you're trying to go kind of 2 feet in to do it full time, you're like, I'm going to try and have the best shot of, this is my work, I own it, I can shop it around the way that I want to, I can use online platforms. And that's just something, I guess, that it wasn't an option before.
Yeah. One way in the past, you had the traditional comic publishers that you had to get into and had to do business with them. But now a lot of other options, and that's becoming the default. Is it almost, would you say that's the chosen path, and then the fallback is maybe to work with the old publishers?
I guess it maybe depends on where your kind of inspiration for things comes from. I mean, if you grow up obsessed with Superman, no matter when that is, you're probably going to want to try and write or draw for Superman. But if you have different influences, say, I love painting as well, I've got animation that I love, you maybe just see it as one path to getting to do what you love doing.
Yeah, no, it now it makes sense. I was looking at your page before chatting with you, and first of all, you mentioned you're a painter, and you did both visual art and I mean, painting is visual art, but kind of sequential art and painting and everything else. And I'm struck, the pictures that you show of the project, they're colorful, they're stylistic, they look great. I mean, your studio, you couldn't have picked a more kind of idyllic picture of your studio and the pictures on the wall. Putting all that together, is it like, this is your first comic you're putting to market, or graphic novel rather. When you're posting all together and you step back and you see those same pictures on the wall of everything, like what's that feeling like?
Oh, I'm so bad for working on an iPad, a computer, a sketchbook, and not stepping back and looking at it. And I had advice from a few different people that I knew while I was creating the 2 different books, who said, please print it out, put it all over your home, put it all over the walls, not just for the sense of perspective with corrections and things you might need to change, but also just for the sense of achievement or accomplishment, to have it out there and say, oh, okay, that's what I've been working on, as opposed to this tiny screen over the last year. So yeah, the photo, thank you, that looked nice. You should maybe ask my boyfriend that I live with. I had it all over the flat, every single room.
I think it's great. But I love that advice, because a lot of people get caught in their own head, like you're saying, and they one of the negatives to technology, right? You see these pictures of comic artists in the 70s and 80s, and they've got huge workshops and paper everywhere and stuff on the walls, and I mean, just the physical material it had to be. And now with the digital age, it's very easy, just up to the cloud. It's saved out of one little screen, one little window into your world, and it makes sense about the quality control, but the accomplishment, that's pretty powerful. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think even if you have everything on a screen and you have it there until you're printing, and maybe you send the PDF to a few different people, you're not really getting the same level of advice back. You can, if you have it all over your studio or your home, you can say to people from all elements of life, whether it's family, people that don't normally read comics, people who love comics, they can come in and look at it firsthand and just give you an immediate response, as opposed to this kind of downloading a file, going to page 90, seeing if there's a smudge somewhere, you know?
It's not the same.
No.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Mark wanted to draw, but ultimately, obviously fell to writing, and it hasn't been bad for him. I mean, wasn't a bad choice. Does it give you a little bit of, though, you kind of went up to him? You now are putting out a book. You fully drew. It's yours. You did all, so you did all of it, right? You're doing the drawing, the writing, the coloring. You did it. You did all the pieces. He just got one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's going to feel good.
Even if we have, in our homes, say my dad will be doing drawings as gifts for people or portraits and things, and he'll do really beautiful, really accurate portraits of, say, like my stepmom or my sisters. And when people come into the home, they'll be like, "Oh, Emily, that's beautiful. Well done. You did a great job." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take it. I'll steal it."
Nice. I love it. I love that so much. That's so. It's too early to say, obviously, where you go from here, but the piece we've kind of touched on earlier, but I wanted to ask you about the business side of things, because it's pretty common, particularly with artists. A lot of the people I talk to, there's an intimidation of going to Kickstarter or doing the business, and there's a feeling like, I'm going to screw it up. It's you kind of touched on it. It's intimidating. There's pieces, but you were talking more about kind of the reception. I always tell a lot of these people, one, there's lots of people who give advice, but two, it's not that hard. You're dealing with an editor or somebody at Marvel who's collecting this stuff, but the business side is collecting it up. I mean, it's work, but what would you say to somebody who, I mean, you've done it. You've done it with your first book out the gate. What would you say to people who are struggling a little bit with that business side?
I think, honestly, the last 2 years, my main thing that has worked out in terms of galleries, illustrations, comics, has been cold emailing, and people hate hearing that.
Yeah.
But I know if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to do it full time right now. And it feels embarrassing, it feels awkward, and it feels weird. But as soon as you've done it maybe 500 times, when it hits 1,000, it doesn't matter anymore. And I think if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't put your work out there, you don't hear anything about it, whether it's good or bad. And you need to ask for people's advice, even if they say, "That thing is terrible that you've sent me, and here's why." You would rather know now than in 2 years' time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It is hard for people, especially, this space has a lot of introverts in it and people who struggle. And you see that in cons where, sometimes you get the kind of the overreaction behavior, which I think is a lot of the social media problems, quite frankly. But you got to you basically push through. You have to just push through to get to the other end, and then it does get easier.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's scary if something's been living purely in your head and you think, "Oh, not only would I love to create that, I think that other people should love it too." There's a certain level of, especially in Scotland and the UK, of, "Oh, you don't share that. You don't talk to anyone about it. It's just your little private secret." And you have to put it out there. You need to make it happen. And I think Kickstarter is an amazing thing for it. It only costs you money if it's successful, if you meet your goal. And it's quite rare, whether it's fine art or comics or really any creative industry now, that you're not immediately having to pay these upfront fees or a huge toll against your work. So if those things are out there, you do really need to utilize them.
Yeah. Was there a lot of, and I apologize, I should know this, and I was just thinking, I looked into kind of some about you, and I didn't get this part. You did what school did you go to, or did you train for this?
So I got rejected from art school. That's my
More revenge then.
yeah. That was definitely my I'd done art training before I'd applied, so I've always kind of growing up went in and out of different arts projects and things locally, things I'd signed up for. And then I had one art school I wanted to go to in Scotland, and I wasn't ready. But at the time, it was the thing. I had one goal, one journey with it. And when I got rejected from it, I had no idea what to do. So I was working a lot of different jobs. I was a tattoo artist for a while. I worked in offices. I did a bunch of different things. And then I went to university for history, for medical history. And I loved it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I enjoyed it when I was there, but most of my degree was during lockdown and the pandemic. So I did it from home. And then when it finished at about 1 and 2 p.m, I would then do art until nighttime. And luckily during that time, everything kind of snowballed and took off to some extent.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for COVID then. That's a no. I wonder though how many stories there are of people who you start the workforce and maybe it's not the ideal thing you wanted, and you are then suddenly working from home, and that you're not sure exactly the pace, and so you basically have this time to start pursuing the thing you really wanted to do, and it actually became kind of a blessing in a weird way.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I still would have been making this work if it wasn't full time right now. I'd still be making it, putting it aside. But maybe just the timing of working from home helped. And I'd had not too long before COVID, I've had diabetes since I was a baby, so I've got type 1, and I've always kept really well, and I've been really lucky. And not too long before COVID, I had a massive problem with my insulin pump. And I within a few hours, just my blood was purely poisonous. And it like 100 to 0. And within 2 days in hospital, I was much better, but things were very kind of touch and go. Wasn't sure what was going to happen. And after that, I had just total clarity of, I've got rejected from art school. I have all this work. I have a great group of friends that support all of the shows I try and put on. And I was like, no matter what happens now, I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's scary, but also the determination there. I mean, it is, in your heart, you knew at least some of what you wanted to do, and you did it. So now you've got these books out. I like to bounce back and forth a little bit as people are watching the interview. So these books, how long, how many, it's 112 pages, is that right?
Yeah, one's 112 and is told by rats. So Be More Gus is 112 and is told by rats is 120.
That's a lot of book. I mentioned manga earlier. Have you read a lot of that side of the world as well?
I'm only just starting to get into it. I normally right now read a lot of kind of mishmash of artists, illustrators, comic writers, where there's Andrew Burkholder, if you ever seen any of his work, or Will Larren and everything as well, where it's these people that have the kind of abstract label of comics, books, painting. But yeah, more and more I'm like, I need to get into more manga. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like anything, there's a lot of different pieces there, and it is, it will have its time and it will pass as well. But I like the attachment to the artist. Any artists that just stuck with you through your life? And I'll ask it this way: is there somebody that you saw at one point when you were younger, and you're like, I really like this, and then but they followed with you the entire time? Just an artist that was really not just inspirational, just stuck in your mind.
Yeah, I've always really loved David Shrigley, the kind of painter, comic artist as well. And in Glasgow, there's the Gallery of Modern Art, and he always had for the last kind of 20 years, he's had a drawing in there. And it was such a contrast to all of the kind of traditional art that was around it. And it was just a little kind of funny comic sketch of a camera and a photo that someone was taking. And when I was a kid, I had a moment of, I love that. I want to be him. I want this work in here in that style. And I feel that over the last kind of 15, 20 years, he's just kept evolving and evolving with, he's got the paintings, he's got the books, he's got a full scope of things out there. And even Frank Whiteley, I grew up with his kids. So I've always been around his artwork, and I think it's really important that even if your artwork is quite abstract, that you know how to draw, and he can definitely draw. You need to understand the body and anatomy. And he's just technically such a great artist as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever, was there ever, and I'm now picturing in my mind, there's Frank's kids, you're wow, your fathers are discussing the most brutal possible way to murder somebody on a page.
Oh yeah, that was every time.
Some of the pairing of your father and Frank, I think, with the authority and some of those, it's so burned into a generation's mind of just the most awful ways possible to kill somebody on a page.
Oh yeah, it's funny because they would have those conversations, and then we would go and see like a Pixar film together, and it's very once you're in that style and in that world, you can dip in and out of it so easily and be just desensitized.
Oh, for sure. I was going to ask you this right at the end, but I'll do it now because I asked Mark this, and I'm curious if you can. He wouldn't give. He pretended not to know what I was talking about during the interview. But there's this comic that's kind of legendary that he did called Trouble. Did you ever run into that one with him?
So I will say off the bat, he's got he picks and chooses what he'll show me.
Okay.
And I think over time I will see more. But even as a kid, when things came out, say if they were 15 rated or 18 rated, we waited until those ages to see them. So yeah, I've not seen the full catalogue.
Fair enough. No, this one's not really bad kids exactly, but it's he I think he's denying all memory of it. It's a story of Spider-Man's Aunt May when she was a promiscuous teen, and it's got quite a reputation. All right, sorry about that.
My dinner, I will immediately bring it up.
Oh yeah, he was thinking about Trouble a lot. See, just watch his face. I want to see. I always like comics should be fun. We should prank each other a bit. So with these two books, obviously, I was curious about the decision. So they're in the same universe. So basically, you've got a shared universe, but it's not like the multiverse of shared universes. They're just stories that complement each other, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Would you do more in this world?
Definitely. And I think it's been kind of a journey to figure out that the work is more connected than I realised. Because if you work in all these different mediums, you maybe think, well, it's almost like one business and a second business. But everything bleeds into each other. It comes from the same person. It comes from the same inspiration. And with these books, I kind of put them under the umbrella term of a broken apple, because when I was a little kid, I'd be drawing, I'd be making stories, and I made a little book called A Broken Apple, and my mum still got it framed in the house, and it's just silly comic stories throughout it. And I realised that when I was putting these together, that even my paintings feature some of the characters in this, future stories feature people that are in it today, and it definitely overlaps more than I necessarily intended it to.
I like the origin story. So this original book, your mom still has it. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
It's just made of Post-it notes, so it's like the kind of sticky ones you put on the wall, and they were all plastered together, and there's maybe 20, 30 drawings in there that I was maybe only 5 or 6, but I thought it was the funniest stories in the world.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's awesome. And when you're thinking of stories, does it kind of, I'm going to ask this question clumsy, but are you imagining kind of the world in your mind? You're as an artist though, do you think in terms of the frames and the pictures, and then it's a goal to get them onto the page, or like, how does that process work from your creativity into the book?
So I've only quite recently started keeping a sketchbook. I never ever used to do that. And I would just paint, and if I didn't like it, I would paint over it. if I was drawing, it would go in the bin and I would start again. So I've been keeping a sketchbook, and it's good to kind of look back at things that you maybe didn't think were anything 6 months ago. And now they're incredibly useful. But yeah, definitely lead with visuals first, with colour first as well. That's important. But I also like having names and then working backwards from a name. I like having a good title and then figuring out what that actually means.
It's a nice blend of writing and art. So for characters like Gus or the Rat Pack, do the origins of these characters actually go back several years, and then you picked them up and brought them out?
Yeah, so the rats, there's a few different characters within that. You've got Hot Rat that wears a fedora, and he's meant to be the kind of sexy one. You've got a criminal who gets up to the worst things. You've got Dr. Rat that gives terrible advice. And over the years, I've had different painting exhibitions under different themes. And sometimes these rats have cropped up in some of the paintings before, maybe without a name, but you can recognise them. And then with Gus, he was an entirely new character that he actually featured in a comic series here in the UK for the big issue.
Oh.
So that's like just a magazine that's here that I did an internship with years ago. And with my cold emailing, I reached out and was like, hey, would you guys fancy 5 years later having a comic strip in the magazine? And then we were thinking about what would be a good idea. And from the bank that I had, Be More Gus was kind of the most appropriate as well. So from there, he kind of grew arms and legs. But that totally comes from just me wanting a chihuahua and trying to convince everyone that I should get one.
Oh, with the success of why wasn't that one of the perks on here? You should have had one of those levels, I mean, you could get a pretty good, I think, response if you're like, if we get to this level, I get a dog. So I think it's a whole other business avenue you could go down.
That's the thing. I was saying to my partner, Chris, I was like, we need to get a dog now. He could be at all the events. He could wear a suit. He could talk to everyone.
Oh, very cool. Your Kickstarter, like I said, it's funded. You're at that first tier. You're getting more. Typically, you get that boost here at the end. You're talking to different people. How is you kind of referenced, but the community, you said it's been really supportive, really good around this. You've clearly stayed off of Twitter then.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not on any social media, so using Kickstarter is almost kind of like its own basic form of social media back when it was more kind and more simple. So yeah, everyone has been really nice. As people have been pledging, I've been messaging them to say thank you. And then most of the time we have a bit of a conversation after, and I find out a little bit more about the audience. They can ask me questions as well. And Narwhal has been so helpful and so lovely. We hadn't met until a few weeks ago, and he's been so kind and really offered to help with advice with it all, because setting up a campaign, I think, is much harder than people realise.
Yeah, that's nice of him. Yeah, I've talked to him before, and that's great. I'm glad, and I left Twitter a bit ago now, and it's I can definitely feel far happier. It's wild how quickly that happens. But people say, hey, if you're not on the social media, if you're not on those networks, then you lose your marketing edge. You're not able to kind of communicate, but you're clearly doing just fine without it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a newsletter, which is just via my website, and that's my only forum, really, where people can speak back and forth, but it's not as if it's this wide net that's interacting with each other. And I had Instagram, I had Twitter. It was mainly my partner that was helping me with my Twitter. I didn't really understand it. Had a few different things, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I never really got into any drama, but it was just a lot of time. And especially if you're an artist, you're then making work that's for social media, and it's not even what you enjoy, never mind the fact you can't sell it. So it's so many hours of the day for it not to really have like any benefit. It might not have any reach. It might not go anywhere. And I met some really great people via Instagram, via Facebook, but those relationships have maintained. And then, as you say, you can kind of just feel that that weight lift off after you leave.
It's well, I mean, you kind of said it. It's a trap of I need to go there because I need to get my name out there, and now that my name is out there, I need to create content for social media because that's what's going to get more attention, and then I need to boost engagement. And engagement seems to get boosted by negativity by and large and yelling at people, and then very soon though you're looking back and you're like, I'm about 8 steps away from actual producing anything, and I'm making Mark Zuckerberg wealthy, but I'm not doing anything for me. And, that's awesome. It's funny though. Everybody I talk to, whenever we do these interviews, you could tell as like, so how active are you on social media? And every happier person is either off it completely, and everybody's like, I'm really struggling to get through the day. They're like, well, what do you do? Well, I do post for 5 hours a day.
I just don't really know anyone that has massively benefited from having it. I mean, it's amazing if you live in an area where you maybe can't meet up with other creatives. It's a great way to meet those people. But beyond that, I don't really know anyone in writing and art and fine art that has had a massive reach from it or their business propelled from it either.
Just more and more steps away from what they like to do. So, and they have to like convince themselves that they like that, and then pretty soon you're not doing art at all. But anyway, that's awesome. So I'm glad that the community is there, and so you get done with this. Is there there will be another project, I'm assuming, after this one. How long before you kick into the other thing? Not that but please, for the people listening, back this one, and then we'll worry about the next one. But where do you think it goes from here?
I think I'm similar to my dad in a lot of ways, that we like wearing a lot of hats and changing it up. So I've already got another collection of paintings that I've largely started. I've got boards behind me on here.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I'm currently looking for a location to show those. They're a little bit more creepy, a bit more scary, more kind of horror based. And then I've got a new series of strips that are going to appear in the back of some of Image Comics, called Bird Dad. So that's coming up later in the year as well.
That's really cool. One more thing while I have you. So I have, I mentioned I have 2 daughters. So one heavily into art, and she's been on the show before, and she's kept a sketchbook, and now I'm seeing her do a lot better than I am. I'm similar to your dad, I think, in that I wanted to do art, and then life just always took me down a different path. Now, unlike being, also a world famous writer, I unfortunately just went into business and nobody cares about me. But my daughter is definitely into art. I'm going to definitely show her this thing. But what she's, I think, trying to figure out her path. What would you tell her?
I honestly think you just need to try everything. You can start on one path with art, especially going, oh, I love painting, but it turns out you're really good at animation. You could start on animation, you're really good at something else. And I think the fun thing with art is that you can try something, and if it doesn't work, you can let it go. So give everything a shot, speak to as many people as you can, get as much advice as you can, but also don't put too much emphasis on formal art education. If you can go and do it and it works for you, that's amazing. But there's so many people out there that either didn't go, or if they did, they're like, oh, it was a fun time, but I didn't learn anything until after I left,
It's funny you say that, because so I took some art school, and I took classes, and I remember having just fights with the instructors constantly. And I took in some work from Bill Sienkiewicz and Chris Baclow, I think. And I'm showing it, like, I like these people, and the instructor there's like, that's the worst shit I've ever seen. I'm like, how they're successful? What are you doing there? But anyway, I think that's great advice, and thank you all. I'll pass along, and definitely have her read the book. Any kind of big things to kind of wrap up with? Anything, people who are looking at this, you see the link in the video description, you've seen it on the screen now, you got to go do it, and you got to do this with some haste, right? This project is closing, although you'll have the opportunity, I think, to have after sales. I'm sure if for some reason somebody is listening to this interview, it's a month from now, they missed it. We're kind of forecasting into the future. How do they get a hold of you? Do they go to your website, and then they can still kind of try and get into the book, or is there going to be something for people like that?
Yeah, so everything's just quite simple and easy. It's emilybrooksmillar.com. Everything's on there. There will be a shop link, which will hopefully have the books. But if not, there's a pop-up, there's a link for the newsletter, and my newsletters are only once or twice a month. There's no bombarding, there's nothing too crazy. But everything that you would need to know is in there.
Excellent. Well, please subscribe to the newsletter, listening to this, and go back the Kickstarter. And if it is later, a lot of people come to these months later and discover them. You should support Emily. So go to the store, go to the website, get involved. And Emily, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thank you so much. It's scary and exciting to be in a new realm, and it's just lovely to talk to someone that's so kind and open about things.
Yeah, well, absolutely anytime. And let's stay connected. We could talk after the air. But Emily, I wish you all the success, and please go back the book. And I'm excited to read it myself. I can't wait to get it.
Thank you.